also want to hear from you, from both of you, about Hreflang tags. Everyone talks about that, right? And that's really complicated. I think a lot of bigger brands as well, they also mess up with Hreflang. What is your experience? Have you also witnessed something really crazy? And maybe people for UK as well saying en-UK. Classic, right?
Classic.
Go for it.
Classic. And not just an SEO joke, it actually happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so maybe I will take this one. There can't be an SEO conversation about international SEO without the Hreflang mentioned. I just had a collaboration with an agency. So my client is migrating their huge website, and a new agency stepped in to do the redesign, and they offered a pre-audit because they want to know what's the situation before we launch a new site. I was like, sure, go for it. And they messaged me and asked about Hreflang in the email, but gave me a screenshot of HTML lang code. And I think there's a big thing when people in SEO are divided into two groups. Those who actually know Hreflang, and then they're like, easy, because when you get it for life, I would say. Doesn't really change. There's very logical, complex but logical rules. And then people who never really touch Hreflang, so they have no idea. And for them, anything that has language code in it might be already Hreflang. So obviously, poor people, probably great SEO people, but not international SEO, they just never scrolled down enough to get to the actual Hreflang. I'm sure if they spotted that, they wouldn't have thought HTML lang is the thing. But I would say that, the biggest thing is this barrier of stepping into understanding it exists and how it works. And I think don't be ashamed to not know, because it's a very specific implementation for very specific cases. So if you are not an international SEO, you have nothing to do with it, maybe that's the time when you take an advice from international SEO and you save yourself hours of discovering the whole new world that is very specific to few cases in your life. And I would say also many people overlook that it's not just HTML tags. It can also be an XML sitemap or even a header implementation. So even if you don't see it, doesn't mean it's not there.
Definitely. But make sure you're consistent, right? If you have something else in XML sitemap, something different in HTML, and your header says something else altogether, oh my God, that will be a nightmare.
Which happens a lot. Forgotten XML sitemaps that have been sitting there for ages, while there is also the HTML tags in place, often conflicting.
I think also with the Hreflang tags, it's a little bit a problem with if you're working with a web developer, that of course he doesn't need to know how Hreflang tags work, because that's SEO. That's what we do. But if you say we had we were working on one project where they actually it was an online shop, 7 languages, and they want to have every country of the world, which was already a discussion to say, like, do you really need to sell your vouchers in Nigeria in German? Don't think so, but so already this discussion. And then with the Hreflang tags, it was really, we wanted to have Hreflang tags in place, and the web designer was, no, you don't touch our code. So it was like, you can't give us some insights on Hreflangs because that's code stuff and that's what we should do. I said, but you obviously what you implemented is not even language code. That's not even existing. And you really had to explain them also, like, what is the language? What is the language code? What is language and place and everything? And I think they felt like we are getting into the dead terrain and we shouldn't recommend anything, and they didn't even want to make questions and just implemented something, and you're just like, but if you didn't understand it, why didn't you ask when we had the meeting? That was really hard to discuss, because it feels really soon that, okay, it's web development and why should an SEO know about it? But it's actually SEO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Hreflang, even John Mueller, I think, tweeted sometime last year saying Hreflang is probably one of the most complicated tech SEO element, right? So element or concept that people generally fuck up with. So I think rule of thumb, if you talk about Hreflang tag, 1, stop guessing, right? For the UK, dear people, it's GB, Great Britain, right? Not UK, which I've seen like one of the most common.
Which UK goes for Ukraine.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So do follow ISO codes for languages, countries, and do not assume that, okay, it would be this for that, right? And like also, for example, here Krinal mentioned that one of his leaders was asking him, why don't we have EN-EU for Europe? right? So that's also classic, right? I mean, you can't just think about that, okay, we have a region and we would have, some ISO code for that region. Just validate that. If you have something for the region in ISO codes, you can use it, of course, right? If you don't have it, don't just guess and assume that, some magic will happen, right? So yeah, that's again, rule of thumb. So ISO codes, and make sure, they're consistent. If you're using XML sitemap or HTML or headers of the page, they should be consistent, right? And third, if you're using, for example, only in HTML, make sure they're accessible. I've also seen websites where, they're dynamically loading it, right? And the first DOM, you don't see any hreflang tag. And they're assuming like, hey, why are we not ranking, in this particular country? Or why are we ranking with wrong URLs? Because search engines are not able to see those tags, right? So make sure they're accessible, right? And you can also easily verify that in Google Search Console as well, for instance, right?